My name is Amalie Frederiksen, and I run this small art agency called Another Public, and I do participatory collaborative projects in different public contexts, focusing a lot on social patterns, behaviors, and community building. And room service is one of the projects that we do continuously. It's a project that moves to different places and different organizations to discuss some of the challenges and methods of guesting other territories when doing art projects. But of course, this is also relevant for projects that are not rooted in the art world. I'd like to also introduce Lasse Mouritzen, who will be the co-moderator today, and who is also the conversation partner and brain behind everything what's going on here today. And we will try to make sure that this event goes smoothly. And we have invited a panel of art practitioners, and all of them are doing art projects with people who are having different lives and different cultures than themselves. Of course, they do that in very different ways, and they have different methods and philosophies of engaging with sites and people and cultures. The panel are curator Charlotte Brandt from Denmark, and then we have Kenneth Belfeld, artist from Denmark, and then we have online two guests who can hear us now, and that is Vincent Rumahloine from a city called Bandung in Indonesia. He's an artist. And then we have Dominique Lämmli. She's also an artist, a curator, researcher, and PhD from Zurich in Switzerland. And they will be joining us later on, and we will be able to actually see them. So yeah, today we're going to talk about some of these challenges and ethical questions when doing projects on other people's territories. And some of the questions we want to raise is when and why is it important to do these projects? And is there a limit of what kind of art projects we also can do as white Europeans carrying also a colonial history? And on what terms should we actually continue to do projects in other cultural contexts? This is of course an event where you can participate, but we will try to do this like this. There will be one presentation with Charlotte, and then one presentation with Kenneth. Then we open up for discussion. There will be a break around 5:15, where you can have another drink by Jesper, and then we're gonna end around 6:30, and you will get the third drink. So just to introduce this drink concept, I hope you enjoyed the first one. It's the first out of 3 that you will have today, and Jesper will introduce in a bit this drink. And this, of course, to make you feel relaxed and welcome, but it's also to make you think a little bit about how cultural habits and histories are integrated and shaped by our daily actions. And there are small recipes also. But I'd like to give the word before we start to Jesper to introduce the drink.
Thank you very much. My name is Jesper. The drink we're drinking is called grog. It's fairly simple. It's 1 part rum, and then we have to have 8 part water. This drink actually dates back to 740, the 21st of August, where Vice Admiral Edward Vermont gave the orders to the daily ration of rum should be watered up with the ration of 1 part rum and 4 part water. And if you had been a good husbandman, whatever that meant, if you were a sailor, I don't really know, but I guess that if you did your chores and you had salt, you could share it with, trade it with sugar. And plenty of sugar would be nice. And lime. The thing about lime is that also was a good thing for the C vitamins, and a big problem was scorbut. And it was kind of strange because it was first in 1747 that it was officially said that lime is good for scorbut. But like the privateer Sir James Lancaster actually wrote in 1601 that lime actually would help the sailors with scurvy, and it's really easy to see because scurvy is basically just lack of C vitamins. So that might have been like the dear admiral's hidden agenda to make sure that you get your C vitamin without questioning the Navy's authority. The reason why he watered it down was that it was very common that you got that you had like your ration of rum. Actually, the ration of rum for sailors were like a half a pint of rum per day, which were kind of a lot, and you think why? But it was actually, I mean, that was their kind of medicine. It was not a very fun job, and it was maybe like the easy way to make them do their job, to make them become like, I guess, functional alcoholic. But then some of them actually saved the rum and had in portions, so sometimes it got a little out of hand. So the admiral said like twice a day this was served, and if you had time you could put it in. Also, I mean, something that is really nice for it is like ice. I mean, they didn't have ice, but we do, so there's no reason why we should not have it. And I mean, and I see that the ice has dissolved. So here you have it, grog, and this actually is kind of turning out to be like a kind of a Tahiti drink. I can name it. Thank you very much.
Jesper. And now I would like to give the word to Charlotte. You are going to present some cases from projects you did in Tbilisi and East Jerusalem, talking a little bit about also how you as a guest and traveler are carrying geography with you that transforms in the new context. And yeah, looking forward to that.
Thank you. Well, I can't do such a performance that Jesper just did, but I mean, that was a really nice one. So thank you, Jesper. Well, I don't know, for those of you who do not know my practice, I've created many years ago an office that I called a mobile office called Råderum, which means creating space, that have been working with different kinds of public or the public realm in different ways for many years now. And yeah, I'm very happy for this invitation because, of course, working outside the context of institutions always seem to raise certain questions about where do I as a guest, you know, speak from, and who do I sort of engage in whatever is the performance or the act or the activity that you do, which is crucial, of course. So the projects that I have 10 minutes, so I've just chosen two projects that I will just be very short introducing here. But one of the projects was a project that I did in together with Jesper actually, and another artist, Christian Elvar Dinesen, in Tbilisi, in Contemporary Art Institution there. And we have some photos of it. Yeah. Cool. And at that point, I was discussing with Vato Chiaselli, who is the director of the CCA in Tbilisi in Georgia, how to sort of work together. And I was introducing a figure called Marabito, which is comes from Japanese, and it's like it's a traveler coming from afar. I mean, a stranger coming to a region and bearing with him or her. I mean, it's like a magical spirit that brings with him the not knowing the place that you actually engage in, which is of course trying to turn a bit around the idea of the ignorant traveler, not knowing the place that they inhibit somehow, and hence also bring something with them that can fertilize the situation that they sort of find themselves upon. But also I think what is really important is also that, of course, the fertilization also go the other way around. That if you sort of go into these kind of different territories, or that is actually the wrong picture. But yeah, so this one was the project in Tbilisi. And this is of course a really weird photo, and I really love it. I mean, it's smørrebrød, and it's in a context where nobody knows what smørrebrød is, which is of course the point somehow, but it's also like a public gesture, a public figure, a public sculpture. We were like, for 1 week, we were investigating together with 2 artist groups in Tbilisi, the streets and the public area and the public realm in Tbilisi, doing different performative actions, inviting people in, eating at this time smørrebrød, and it was a sort of a gesture, like the gesture that Jesper just did. It is a gesture of generosity, inviting in, but still also somehow you have the clashes between 2 not understanding languages. You have this is smørrebrød in Georgian, and of course smørrebrød in Danish, which nobody can read. But anyways, the feeling of this gesture became that it was like enriching the area that it found its own place in. So it's like inviting in out of curiosity, but also sort of inviting other kind of context within a specific geographic situation, and bringing something from afar that could somehow create an involvement or a new sort of social engagement in a simple gesture, sharing food that we all know. And I think it is my assumption that this Marabito of today can also sort of, it becomes like a kind of a ritual, and it can create a setting that, repossesses a place somehow. But of course, as a host I've been working for many years with this concept of being both a guest and a host, because no matter where you invite yourself in, be it out here or in other contexts, it doesn't have to be like foreign context. You are a guest, and that sort of have certain implications, and one of them is that you really have to be a good listener. To listen to whatever is sort of going on in the specific place that you're in. And of course, that part of that, it will be like the architecture, to create other kinds of architecture, but it will also be the rituals or the habits of people passing by, who are here in the mornings, who are in the afternoon. I mean, what kind of mental place are you also working within? And the ideal is, I guess, also that the host, when hosting others, actually are becoming radical changed by hosting. So if you're a good listener, you will also somehow bring something from the ones you're hosting with you. It will change your life, so to speak, or at least change maybe a little bit of your life. So in that sense, you have a sort of kind of important entanglement. Yeah.
I'd actually also maybe like to talk a little bit about, I actually want to ask you another question. I want to ask you, because right now at this moment, and that's also why we started this room service thing, is because there's a tendency right now to talk about this. You know, it's very difficult to do anything right as a white person if you go anywhere and do stuff. And some of the points also with this is to also try to talk about, okay, but what do we do then also with this conversation or this situation that is or this narrative or discourse that is very dominating right now. Maybe you can say, how do you like go around that? You know, now I try to take on that hat, you know, being the critical one. But what I'm interested in is also actually, how do we continue to do these projects without being those bad guys who do the wrong thing? Because I've been doing projects also in New York and all these places, and you might know this also yourself, that many places maybe they don't say to you, but the neighbors or the people they talk to are talking about this as a problem. Now we will hear later Vincent, you know, it is a problem. And how do you go around that situation? You don't care, or is it?
I do care.
Yeah.
I think for me it's very important to be hosted by somebody who really hosts you. I mean, in the next example that I showed in El Roche, which is maybe a more sort of ongoing process. There, you know, I had a genuine feeling of that the energy that I brought with me was really welcome, not just by the institution but also by the neighbors. And there actually, what I was doing was not, you know, doing an art piece or doing a project, but just giving up some tools that we've been using in other sort of, you know, environments that they could use, but they had to take them over. They had to make them themselves. I think, and that was really important, that I weren't like doing a project. I weren't building anything. I weren't, you know, doing like a public playscape or anything. They were just, you know, we were having a discussion, and then they had like to either engage me in a certain specific place that they found interesting to work in, or to do it themselves as just an inspirational tool. So that's another way of doing it.
Yeah, that's a total different project also, because it has
Yeah,
this like ownership, and I think also maybe later we can talk about this.
That's why I wanted to show these two projects, because it's different.
Yeah,
this was
very
just
different.
working more with materiality and just, you know, curiosity, and saying that, you know, aesthetic materiality actually can also transform the city, which I also think it still can, no matter from where I speak actually. But that's another story. The other way around, sometimes if you go into really sensible areas, I think this kind of creating energy between, like Kenneth for sure will also talk about afterwards, is more sort of it's a long time process, and it's really much about the one that hosts you as somebody coming from another position somehow, are really, really important. And it can take quite a while to create that kind of trust. It's nothing that it doesn't come quick, I think. Yeah.
I think that's the end sentence.
The end.
Trust.
Great. So our next speaker is Kenneth Balfelt, and Kenneth, you have been working for many, many years now with cities and people from an artistic perspective. Especially with your team, you have been working with social issues and excluded excluded communities or neighborhoods, and you have contributed a lot to urban planning and ways of inclusion, I think. And I've had the pleasure to also be your intern many years ago, which I've learned a lot from. So I'm curious to hear your presentation and discuss with you. So.
Thank you. I don't know if the mic is on. Okay. Some 15 years ago, I did a project in Copenhagen. I think it was the Mændenes Hjem shelter for the homeless or the injection room project. I don't really remember. But I went to this institution who helps drug addicts to get out of their drug addiction. And I went to speak to the head of the place called Anders, and he told me, we interviewed him. We were a couple of people who interviewed him, and he said that he told about a lot of things, but then he said things like I've also been on vacation with some of these people, I mean the drug addicts, and I also, some of them are my friends and they've been to my house and so on. And I was like totally confused because I never heard that you can't, you know, drug addicts, how can they be your friends? How can you trust them? How can you let them into your home and all that? And so after that meeting, I was going to go out and interview some of them. And I was kind of puzzled in my head, and I sat next to one and interviewed him about some things we wanted to know about for the project. And while I was interviewing him, I heard my inner voice, this monkey we all have on the shoulder, saying things like, I'm not sure I can use what he's saying, or I think he's a bit stupid, or I'll just pretend to listen and then I'll figure it out myself. Stuff like that. And when I left, I kind of, you know, realized that this was my prejudice talking. And I realized that, you know, I thought I was all clean and everything. I was really good and morally sound and ethically and everything. But that experience gave me the kind of incentive to think about how can I do this differently, because that doesn't work. It's not an equal conversation to have with someone, and why even bother to ask him if I'm not interested in the answers, if I don't think he can answer the questions, stuff like that. So that made me think a lot about how to do it in another way. And some of the things I came up with was that I only wanted to ask people I worked with. I mean, I ask questions about what I want to know and not what I think they can answer. And that made a really big difference in terms of actually respecting them. And also I thought about that every time I do a project with someone like these marginalized people, drug users, homeless, whatever. I've been working a lot in this area. This was my hood for like 10, 15 years, making projects all over the place. I said that when I do projects with them, I want to get something out of it myself. I want to be produced myself. I want to learn something myself. Because I would expect the same if I did a project with any of you in here. And why shouldn't I have the same expectations for these people? So these were some of the kind of tricks I kind of set up, or these dogmas I set up in order to find a more equal way of speaking. And over the years it has developed, and I kind of wrote down a list here with different things I will talk about. One thing is that when I do a project, I always start up unprepared, I say. And now when I work with municipalities and institutions and so on, I call it strategically unprepared, because it sounds a little bit better. But the point is that I shouldn't, or we as my team, we shouldn't get ideas or have any sketches or so on before we enter the context, before we understand the context. So by being unprepared, we are a bit nervous. We're always nervous when we start our project because we haven't decided anything, we haven't planned anything, but we just start up and then we listen, and we become, because of that, we are unprepared, we become dependent on someone from the context. We need to find someone who can tell us where we are and what is relevant for this context. So this is one of the other tricks. And then we have, over the years, we have kind of thought about how to talk to people, how to interview people about things. And if we go out, I mean, I don't know if you know anything about practice, but we did a lot of urban projects, urban planning projects, urban spaces and stuff like that, institutions. And if we ask people, what would you like? Then we get a lot of ideas. And in a way, we are forcing them to be architects or urban planners or something, which they are not. And we found out that doesn't work, because they are answering questions they can't really answer. And also, we get a lot of ideas as solutions, and you can't accommodate a lot of solutions, a lot of ideas. And typically we saw this also when you have user involvement, like let's say they want to make a new urban space in Copenhagen, they have a citizen hearing meeting, 50 people come and they say, what would you like to have for this new urban space? And then everybody takes a post-it and write down, I would like a swing, I would like a carousel, I would like a parkour, furniture, whatever. I would like a bench and so on. And then the architects, which I've seen and which I've heard from many architects, they have all these 251 post-its they got, and then they kind of, okay. And then they start all over and find their own ways, because you cannot accommodate all of these ideas. And you don't really, and the thing is, so what we do now is that when we do these projects, we ask them about two things. What are your needs? And what kind of context is it we are in? We ask them to come with the analysis of the place. I mean, mostly on the social level. What is happening? Who is here? Who likes who don't know who? And what's happening in the nighttime? What's happening in the weekends? What's happening in winter? All of these things that we can't get to know ourselves. And as I always say when I talk about some of my projects, say any 11-year-old who lives in this area will know much more about this area and the context than I will ever get to know, or any architect or any urban planner or any municipality planner would ever get to know about that place. So our role is to extract that, to translate it into the project. So when we ask about needs, it's a fine line between needs and solutions. So, okay, I would like to have a bench, they say, that's a solution. I say, okay, but what kind of need is it you want to have for that bench or whatever? I would like to, so maybe someone says, I would like to lie down and take a take this, what is it called, to get a sunburn, whatever it's called. Suntan, a tan maybe. Volunteer, yeah, okay, so you want to get a suntan, okay, so you want something you can lie down on, okay, that's a very special bench, okay, I would like to have a backrest, because I don't like sitting on benches without a backrest, so I want to be comfortable and something. So you see, once you get, I mean, it's a stupid example, but you get the point that once you get into the very specific needs you actually have, which they are experts on, then you can begin to have lots of needs and put them together to furnitures. For instance, in Folkets Park, we made some furnitures which had the needs of sitting down with backrest, lying down because you want to have a suntan, lying down because you're homeless, exercising parkour or training, or your children would like to play on them. So all these 6 needs are in the furnitures we made. So this is an example of how to use that. And what happens with that in terms of the topic we have today is that we are really getting into understanding what is actually needed here, what is actually at stake here, what is actually happening here. Like one of the things we also found out in that project was that if the brown men, like me, were sitting on the benches next to a pathway, there are many brown young men in that park, and people think they are gangsters. Some of them are in gangs, and some of them sell hash, or one of them sells hash, and so on, to think they are pushers. But if they sit next to a pathway, you won't cross the park with that pathway. So we pushed away all the benches from the pathways. So that's something we found out as well. Okay. We also, when we do projects, think about people as active subjects and not as victims. Because we work a lot with marginalized people, they have a tendency, I've experienced that a lot of times, to tell, I've heard people tell about the first time they were raped or something, assaulted by their parent or stuff like that. They're very used to, in a way, to victimize themselves. And I kind of said that's not a way to get an equal relationship about something, a project or something. So we try to, create a role for them where they're active subject, where we trust them in coming with important information for the project. I mean, that's what we do. That's what I've learned, that if you want to do something that is actually relevant to the context, you have to develop a method that is specific for that context. And it can be very difficult. The more years, the more experience you get, the more difficult it is to make something that is relevant. So that's a problem I kind of experience.
The first question, I was wondering if you could put some words on your experience of getting invited for this event in the first place. I'm curious to hear if you felt that your way of working was fit for this kind of a little bit more critical talk about socially engaged practice, and if you saw your own practice or your own way of working from a different angle, or had some reflections upon that invitation.
I mean, first, I'm really, really happy about getting criticism. I think it's really, really important that we can talk about how we do stuff, and especially within the art world or whatever kind of world. I don't know if you're from the art world. I know some of you are, but that we can talk about how we do things, and so I welcome it very much. I mean, when we talked about this thing today, we talked about this thing with, can white people do projects about black people? Can you be an actor and be a heterosexual and do a role where you are homosexual and stuff like that, which is the same thing that we are talking about here with my projects. How can you, I mean, to some extent that you represent someone, how can you go into their context and actually make something that is relevant for them, and how can you talk to them in a respectful way? How can you see them? I mean, basically. So I think that when I first, I mean, I guess you asked because I was a bit puzzled in the beginning about why inviting me for this and how do I fit in, and so but I find it when I looked at this list I made, I can see that I've made a lot of efforts to try to actually engage with this question of how to go into someone's territory and actually work with them and actually give them a voice, because that is what I'm doing. I mean, I'm trying to give someone a voice into urban planning, just to put it shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I have also been having a lot of similar thoughts about my own way of working, especially in Sydhavn, where I work now. And there was also this the critical perspective on the idea of giving a voice is often said that you can, whenever you tend to work with a group of people that maybe you don't come from the same area or you don't similar to them, but you represent them or you give them a voice, you also, there's this Indian intellectual Spivak, she would say that you actually also take away a voice by doing that action, or not, you don't do it, but there's a possibility of, even though it's well intended, there's a possibility of actually taking away a voice because you represent it, end up representing it, and maybe those people that you represent lose their actual agency or capacity of raising their voice. Of course, there's a lot of complexities to it, but what do you think about that?
I mean, you can, at some times, you can become, let's just call it arrogant. Because in a way that is that you, okay, now I understand, and now I can go and talk to municipality that they want this.
Yeah.
And so in that action, it's that can happen. And I actually had an experience with I made a project at Café Heimdal a long time ago, where I had some young second generation or from, I don't know what the fuck you call them in English, but immigrant kids, we can call them, you know what I'm talking about, who lived in this troubled neighborhood, and they were part of the project to make a new sign for a bodega, a bar where most ethnically Danish people are sitting and drinking. And at some point I talked to a journalist, and I said something about the group and who they were, and then the headline was that immigrant kids make a new sign for the bar, something like that. And then one of the guys, this 15-year-old guy came to me, and I'm so ashamed, I don't tell it very often. And he said to me, I'm not a fucking immigrant kid. I lived here all my life. Why is this headline here? And so on. I mean, and it was really embarrassing.
Yeah.
And what I realized, not just by that, but in that period, was that I had to make this a test for how I talked about someone or a project we did together, that I should be able to go back and say the same thing to them. So that's my test that I use now. I should not go and talk in a context like this and hope they're not listening in, those people out there, because I'm saying something that maybe they shouldn't hear. And that, in a way, have changed my mindset very much in terms of that question, to how to, represent them, or actually, that's the second level, but the first level is to actually respect them and actually be on eye height, and that we are talking about the same thing in the same way, and we understand it in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well. Oh, okay. Yep. Well, the next drink is sangria. Some of you might wonder why. It's because you probably wonder, like, it has a punch theme. It's sangria punch, and, well, it kind of is. And also have a, gloves off, not going to be gloves. And it has a kind of an interesting, story. The kind of way you make it is like take some fruit, lime, cuts, orange in cuts, and apples in cuts. And then take some cinnamon and some cloves. It's a good way to put them into the orange. It's also easier to get it out afterwards. Yeah, six times. This is like 5, and we take a little half. So, and then some brandy. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, and then add a little sugar. This is just water and sugar. It takes our flavor. And of course, we need the red wine. And then it just stays for a day, and we just wait for it to be ready. Yeah, but I think we don't have the time for that. Half the way? Yes, I cheated. So, at the World Fair in 1946. No, 64. 1946. 64, 64, yeah. They were serving sangria so they kind of claim sangria. And now sangria, like this cold spice wine, this is ours. And this just wait for the next day, this here. And when you serve it, you just pretend the next day go, serve it with like plenty of ice. Yeah, okay, this is a little dangerous. Yeah, just half ice, half up. Because sangria is not really meant for be a strong drink. It's basically meant to be like a summer refreshing, kind of not this weather.
We will bring Vincent Rumahloine. He's joining us from a city called Bandung in Indonesia. And Vincent is an artist, and he's going to talk about something he calls the documenta effect.
My name is Vincent. So I came from Indonesia. So as you can see on my presentation that I'm going to speak about the documenta effect. But why I came out with this idea is strongly related with what I did in Indonesia. You can check my works in my website, so I can talk quite a bit in general about what I did, and then I can go through the documenta effect issue. So I work with the community since 2014. I work with many different people from different background in Bandung. So I try to make a bridge between the society. At first, I didn't think this is going to be an art project because I just did it like that, because at that time I didn't have a chance to do exhibitions in Bandung because my approach is quite different. I used socially engaged art in 2013-14, and then it's not a thing at that time, and then it becomes a big thing in 2017 and go. And until 2019, I heard about how Ruang Rupa become the artist director of Documenta. So I study in ITB. This is a university that is like or built by the Dutch. So we are kind of like have this Western way of thinking and working with art. So Documenta is like one of the the holy grail of the event. So when it came out, it's really having a big thing in our city. And then it's also affecting what I did and also affecting on what I saw in the art scene, where there are many people who start to doing this socially engaged art, which is good also for the people, but sometimes they are not positioning themselves as part of them. So they sometimes it just came and make projects and then go back and then just trying to get something from the community, which I really strange to see, because I only work with the same community for 10 years, and then okay, this is something that really interesting, and then the Documenta effect came after. So I will start my presentation. If there is something you want to ask, Amalie, you can ask it after. Maybe something I forgot from our last conversation. So I call it Documenta effect. So as we can see, that in 2019 news came out when I was in Europe. So Ruang Rupa, one of the collectives in Jakarta, it's become the artist director of Documenta. And yes, we are happy. And also when I was in Europe, it's changing my day completely in the place where I stay, like with the artists. Suddenly I become like, everyone asking me different questions, and then they see me differently in a way, so I can see like, oh, this is have a good feeling, yeah, when one of our people become in the center stage of the art scene. So I kind of like, and I thinking like, okay, there might be something happen in Indonesia when I would go back, and then yeah, I can explain you a bit about Indonesia. Indonesia is like 216 million people, and as you can see in this, like Jakarta is only one part of the Indonesia, which is like really big. And then Ruang Rupa and me is also over here, so I'm not really representing what happened in Indonesia in general. So this is also the problem with the Documenta effect later. So yeah, as you can see, I think I talked with Dominique before this in our Zoom, like collective is become a new trend. Everyone crazy about this in the art scene, like everyone to make a collective, and it's the same thing in Indonesia. So I see like, okay, this is a really good thing when people start to working together, so they can do something greater than only showing the art in the gallery or just doing something for the art market. Because in Indonesia, the art market is really strong, and then I really want to know like how, there's so many questions in my presentation here, like how collectives are going to be interpreted in the Western way of thinking, because this is might be a problem, because collectivism is our way of life. This is like our daily life. Without doing nothing, we're already living as a collective. So it's a strange thing that we are trying to be collective in the contemporary art scene. So I think you just like came back to your nature, and then you just like working normally, and then you will be like working collective. For me, this is an interesting fact, and I really want to go in deeper into this. So this is how we live every day. So we hang out a lot. This is like considering like counterproductive for some people that came to Indonesia. I met a lot of Westerners came like, why you spend a lot of time talking like this, but they don't see any result. But the result is came like magic when the day of the exhibition came. So this is also I found it like from the people and also from the Western. I talked with both, and then the people say like, yeah, you just wait for that guy. He just want to do exhibition. So we know what he want, and then we going to make it happen in our time, they said. So this is a really interesting fact that I found. So yes, like I said, we are happy and glad that one of us become an artist director of Documenta, and it will be a great thing for our art scene for sure. But big waves may wipe many things and also break things. like we already encountered in Indonesia, like we had like a lot of tsunami happen. So what we should do and what we have to do, because I can see this is like a really big wave, because I can feel it like there's so many big wave of donors, big wave of researchers, curators, artists, and extra will come to Indonesia. But kind of like happy with the COVID in this term, because it's kind of like stopping it a bit, you know, not happening like right away after the announcement happened. But now vaccine is there, and then we started to can we travel again, and then people start to use Zoom a lot, so we can start. We need it start to happen again. What concerning me about is like what we can do together from both sides, from each side and that side, to be able to reduce the effect. So this is what like I'm keep on asking, and then when Amalie come to me and then like, yeah, and this conversation is going to be a really good place to talk about this, because we're going to be talking about some strangers come to your house or come to your place to do something like so-called art, and there is so many risks on doing that, especially during this time. So not only in Java, because the effect now only in Java, but people in Java knowing about this, and Indonesia is like this big. Now I'm working with this community over here, which is they work collectively, and then they are really like raw material of collective waiting to be found. I will share this the fact later. Okay, this is also happened during the colonialism era, and it happened to my family actually. So my family at that time to be chose to close with the dust to get access, but in exchange I lost the value of my peoples, and then I become detached from the value, and I become like, you know, constantly in floating, you know, like not having the thing to attach with. So it's I don't know, I see like it's going to be a problem in the future if we do this. So what we should do together, for sure, we cannot stop artists, curators, researchers to come to Indonesia. So this is what the question I want to ask to the people here that came to this meeting. So this is the big questions. Can we work and share without any agenda projects of exhibition or artwork? We just share and see what we came for, and then try to know each other, like what happened already, like the one that already presented, like sharing food together, but not as an artwork, but as a place for knowing each other without projects and exhibition, because this is really important nowadays, especially with the wave, because the risk is quite big, not only for the people in Java, but for me all over Indonesia. So I think that's my presentation for this. Maybe there is something I missed, and Amalie can help to ask. Thank you.
So we're just going to take like a few questions or comments, and then we go to the next presentations.
I think what you're hinting at is that could you? I mean, I don't know, could you? I don't know. I guess when you are invited for doing the documenta, what you're hinting at, I mean, that is a project, that is an exhibition. And what I also found really interesting when visiting Indonesia is, of course, this collectivity that you have as a way of actually it's just there everywhere. I mean, people are living together in another manner than we are in the European context. And is your question whether we can transfer this kind of collectivity to a European context? Is that actually what you're trying to hint at, to do at Documenta, or to do when visiting Europe? I mean, setting up a new agenda. Could you like do just dinners, eating together for like 2 months of exhibition instead of showing us stuff, objects and raw material? Is that a sort of, could that be a strategy?
Yeah. Thank you for the questions. I think I tried it once when I was in Poland. I tried to do like this nongkrong, is the hangout thing, the term of hangout in Indonesia, which is the part of this collective. So I tried to use this in one of my events. So I said like, I will try to do this like in the Indonesians do. Like, okay, we met at 8 and then everyone came at 8. So we kind of like, okay, we start this event like organically, like we see. So it's kind of like impossible for me to see that, because after 30 minutes, everyone just like staring at each other and then like, what we do here? And then are we going to stay like hang out all the time without talking about things? And then this is what I see, like, okay, this is going to be really hard to explain. And then the curator came and then she asked me like, can you start it? Okay, so yeah, I know, I just tested the limit of time, you know, to be when everyone is getting anxious, because it's kind of like unproductive in a way. So I'm not saying that we need to put like this way of like hang out like without like direction, like let's say like that, or to the European context. But for me, it's the important part is just like to see where we can meet in the middle, because that's the problem. So far that I can see, rarely we kind of like equally meet in the middle. So because this is the problem from both sides. So from Europeans, it's just like you always came with the agenda, with the donors and everything, and came with the certain point to reach, and then you came to Indonesia, and then you see this organic way of living, and then it's push you too much to the collective, to the people, and then they just like, okay, we just follow this bule. It means our term to white people, so we just follow this bule. And then when he left, so when they left, okay, we just continue our life. So the problem in Indonesian part is just like because of the colonialism in Indonesia, we kind of like seeing white people in a different way. So we kind of like, okay, just follow this people, just say yes, just do what he wants. Don't say like our opinion. So this is really interesting, because this always meet and then everything just like seems to be okay. But after the project is finished, and then when I ask the people, and then they say like, I can choose. I don't want to work like this, because it felt like I don't know. It's just like it's not right and then everything. So I said like, why don't you just say to the person, just like no? They said because our hospitality sometimes it's a big. Also, it's become a problem. So for me, it's the best to have like this conversation at first, like these meetings, to share. Let's see what we can have in the middle, and then maybe we can start with some projects. So I think, can we work and share without any agenda? That's the question that we need to do now, as a person, yeah, as a human, not like going to thinking about documenta, because documenta is going to pass anyway next year, and then but the effect is going to be there or longer than that. So I think it's the best to meet in the middle now, like trying to share this more, you know, having this conversation more and more. So and then we find it like together the way, and then we do the trial and error together. That's maybe the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. I think actually now we should bring in Dominique.
So the point I would like to make in my short input is, actually we've been talking also about the problems of cultures, being in one culture, going into the other culture. I think what I want to draw attention to is that we live within a complex world. And I believe that a reductionist way of looking at these complexities, trying to make borders of one culture to the other culture, is not leading us to productive collaboration. So there are varieties of globalization. There is multiplicity and pluralism. And as I said, there are different reactions to these complexities. Some try to reduce it, to take a reductionist approach. Others again view pluralism as a given fact and embrace it and address challenges and apply comparative approaches. So I side with the comparative approach, and in terms of practical work, this means negotiations, starting from vague grounds, accepting diversity, and jointly designing and planning our activity spaces. I think some of the previous speakers have also made this point strong. So I will start with a list of 5 points that I find helpful as orientation points to collaborate. I first here all together, and then I will go one by one. So I think we have to see every person as a universe. We have to design and jointly define what the issue, need, and joint interest could be. So this also emphasizes what Vincent has been saying, that this attitude that it's all about the exhibition and our product is, why should one then work together? Where is the collaborative aspect? Which role do others play within that? I see that as highly problematic. And I believe that we should acknowledge that art is always locally rooted. So I'm highly critical towards the Euro-American art discourses, art historical discourses. I think actually that we are based in Europe are a bit falling back, because we are in the center of an old, highly problematized art discourse, whereas in other regions, such as I've seen in India and Indonesia or Hong Kong, their diversity is embraced, new things can happen, and one is not under this one hat of it has to be art within that Euro-American concept. So it's important to jointly define responsibilities, develop grounded methodologies and protocols, and I will come back to that. And it's important to take account of the particularities, positionalities, histories relevant to the setting and the joint undertakings. So this has been also said by previous speakers. We should refrain from to predefine what we think is actually the case, but what is important for a project is better to establish within the partners who actually want to co-work. So these 5 principles, I started to think along these lines through many conversations with colleagues that I had. So what I'm presenting here, it's not something that I found out myself, but it's through a lot of talks and sharing and inputs from colleagues that are now seeded, or better, it's maybe not seeded, it's better condensed in these 5 points. And of course we have decades of writings and addressing and emphasizing the particularities of given settings and locations, and I listed here a few that were very influential for my work. So some of you might be familiar with global studies, grounded practitioner methodologies, transdisciplinarity, or kaleidoscopic dialectic. These are the frameworks I'm drawing from. So what do I mean when I say perceive each and every person as a universe? So these circles here, there are people. And there's not just culture. We have a lot of different parts in our back package. We carry mental, physical, political, socio-cultural back packages. And to only view collaboration along cultural or geopolitical traits is too limited. We are also formed by class, education, wealth and poverty, race and sex, opportunities, challenges and restrictions. Having said that, I quickly would like to go back, because I would like to pick up here one of the intellectuals, Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen is a Bangladesh-born economist, Nobel laureate, and a Harvard professor, and he has written extensively on inequalities. He sees the reductionist approach as highly dangerous. He said this leads to violence and suppression. In that respect, we also have to ask ourselves if reducing the discussion on collaboration along the line of cultural differences is really effective. Amartya Sen points out that to view our interactions along the line of cultural differences alone is reducing complexities. He instead calls for embracing diversity and to take a comparative approach, which he has demonstrated through his academic work. So now, of course, he's talking about research, but I believe the same is true for practitioner work, that it's most productive to embrace diversity and to negotiate, to talk. I think Vincent, what you have been saying about the process of talking, meeting with different groups of people, explaining and discussing what one wants to do, it establishes the project, because through that you start to get a lot of information. Who has which interests? How would the project actually be perceived? Maybe to call it a project is even wrong. So it's through the negotiation, through the talking from one to the other, that you start to establish what's actually at the core of the project. So the issue, the joint interest, that this is placed center stage, and not the discussion, not the artwork or the exhibition at the end. So let me see, okay. Let me maybe jump to the, how am I with time, Lasse?
Yeah, maybe it's time to finish up, Dominique, because we have reached the time.
Okay, so let me just then say the final sentence. So what one does through this negotiation is creating a constellation where jointly it is decided what one does, who takes which responsibilities and roles, and they can also change throughout the project, of course. So it's an in-process development. And I think the most important thing is that this means that we cannot start with pre-concepts. Concepts can be useful as tools that we maybe can apply and change within the given context, but we shouldn't start bringing them in and then going along that line.
Okay, I was thinking about this question, or no, it's not a question, actually it's more like a thought or something, and it's not really directed to anyone, so I guess you can pick it up after this. But I thought that Vincent's last question about, doing collective work without having an agenda, or at least a project, was quite interesting. I was reminded about what Kenneth said about this, not like coming, about being unprepared, which I really liked as a kind of principle in a way. I mean, at least I like the openness in it. And I'm really curious, maybe you can also say something about that, Kenneth, like when you turn up to something and you have that openness, like, is it a possibility to choose not to do the project? Because that's something I think I've been thinking a lot about, is that, you get an assignment, and when you're working with the municipality, it's very like kind of, it's when you say you're not going to do it, they can get quite angry. And I'm really curious also, like, how does that work on the documental level? Like, if you could say that we're not doing it, we're doing something else completely, in terms of keeping that openness, because I feel like that openness is quite key.
That's a really good question, actually. Do anyone wants to comment on that?
I mean, we really try to prepare about understanding the context. I didn't say that, but everything we can do to understand the context, we try to prepare for that, but not to plan or have any ideas or have any sketches or have any solutions. So there's these two different parts. So we plan. I mean, you can do a lot of things to understand the context, but not to develop anything from it. Get any ideas. Stop getting ideas. Been unlearning to get ideas for many years, until we get into the context and try to understand it and feel that now we understand where we are, who we are with, what is happening, and so on. And then we push the button to get ideas, and always together with people.
Lemon peels for 3 lemons. 3 times 5. 15. This is 50. 15 is kind of a... And this you kind of just mix really good in. And kind of the best thing is actually kind of use your hands. But it calls for like... yeah, a good one. So I think this is fine. Doesn't want to have it all. For me, I kind of find it strange to this thing here on. It's I don't really like in a cocktail, but at that time it was the way to go. It was super the way to go. And just to kind of tell a little cocktail story, there was another admiral. It's funny, like all these stories, like from the British, it's the admirals, but most of it is like from the British Navy. Also because like they had like logbooks, so it's kind of maybe it's some of the only written sources, because maybe other places they're also making punch. They were not writing down, today we made like this punch. They just did make the punch. It was called Admiral Russell. He was like stranded, or he was like ordered to spend the Christmas here in this Cadiz. Yes, thank you. He was not very pleased about that, but he got the governor mansion. So he wanted to throw a Christmas party, and he did. There was like a big fountain, and he made this like extravagant punch, which is basically this recipe. His was just way bigger. It was like it's measured to be around 3,000 to 4,000 liters of this punch here, probably with no ice. And it said that there was a little boy. I will skip the boy, but take the ship that was sailing around on the fountain, stirring it around and pouring up to the important guest. And when the important guest has like tears and went, it was like it was left over, and it was like consumed by the masses. Luckily, there was a doctor who was writing about this, and he informed me that luckily this boy had survived. Which if you were in a doubt that. Well, I think I will take it down and it will be served. Thank you.
Thank you.